Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogman, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. So hi, how's everybody doing? Good, I hope. Everything is good here. Springtime. Everything is looking up. And I'll give you one of my animal stories to emphasize what I'm talking about. As yeah, it's spring, and as I don't know, maybe some of you might know, I have guinea fowls, right? And they roam around the acreage. But for some reason, since it's springtime, I'm gonna. They've done it before, but I haven't really realized the timing on it. I guess it's because it's spring. They've decided to fly over my fence and just go to the neighbors. And around here, everybody's on acres of land. And then the little pea brains get stuck behind somebody's fence, and then you see them hustling back and forth. Or you see me, and somebody word my story that I was caught out with my boxer shorts trying to, and I call it my guinea rodeo. Okay, of me, in these country roads trying to rodeo these guineas, or into back into my yard. I have to open up this big, one of my big 16-foot gates to get them in there. And later, and like, the other day, they flew into this pasture which is fenced, and I was like, unless you guys remember, you know how to fly to get yourself out of there. I'm not gonna go. I mean, even though I know the people that live there, they like get my guineas out of there. I'm telling. So the only thing I can think of. By the way, they're well fed, so it's not that they're looking for food. Believe me, they got plenty of food around here. They've got acres that they could wander, but no, no, no. So yeah, spring is in the air. Most definitely, it's in the air. And I don't know. I guess it's just nature. Oh, I'm gonna chalk it up to that. All right. Before it's like, all right, just stay lost. But I can't help it because those guineas, I got them as a Mother's Day gift like a couple of years ago, and I got them as chicks. So basically, I brought them up, for lack of a better word. So yeah, I don't know about other people, but you kind of get attached to animals you get from when they're very small. So yes, they are. Yeah. And well, and another thing, I'm sure everybody's aware, the cost of eggs. And it's like, once upon a time when I was getting some extra chickens, I told my husband, you know what? These chickens, they're worth their weight in gold. And he's like, come on. He's like, man, you were right. You know, and case in point, I mean, I've gone to regular feed stores. Now is about the time that they'll bring in chicks that you can buy, and they're empty. They're gone. You go into the bins, there's nothing left there. And I mean, I have incubators and I've incubated them before, but the problem with that is that you really have no guarantee if you're going to get a hen or a rooster, and somehow or other, you end up getting more roosters than pullets or hens. And then you end up with what I do, where I have all these bunch of boy roosters running around, um, giving me a headache because up to a certain age they all get along, and then they start fighting badly in some cases. So I told myself, no, I'm not going to run that risk of hatching on incubators. I've got eggs that I could incubate, but so yeah, that's where I'm at right now. So now I've got to like skulk around one of these feed stores and ask them, when are they doing the next delivery of chicks? And then run over there and buy overpriced chicks before somebody else does away with one of those deals. It's like what? Some of the things that, you think about, but yes, but like I've said before, sometimes dull is good. Uninteresting is good because sometimes it can get, in other words, interesting sometimes is like hectic and you pull your hair out and it's like, God. So yeah. And one of those deals. Crazy stuff, but not really crazy enough. I'm sure for some people it's very vanilla. There's nothing wrong with vanilla, I'll tell you that much. But anyway, let's get on to the good part. The good part is we have a guest today as Stories of the Supernatural. His name is Nomar Slevik. He's an independent creator, researcher, and investigator in numerous aspects of the paranormal. He delights in sharing stories through different mediums such as books, documentaries, and podcasts. He's shared his work with hundreds of thousands of enthusiasts and has maintained a steady output of material for over 20 years. He's been fascinated by all things paranormal since childhood, beginning with a UFO encounter at 4 years old. His life's passion has been to research, investigate, write, and share UFO and extraterrestrial encounters from everyday people in a way that conveys the human element of profoundly strange encounters. Help me welcome him. How are you doing today, Nomar?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks so much for having me, Marlene.
No, on the contrary. I'm going to ask you, what was that 4 year old, that experience you had as a 4 year old? What happened?
Yeah, I had fallen asleep while my mom put me to bed,
Mm-hmm.
and something loud woke me up in the middle of the night. And when I say middle of the night, I'm 4 years old. I don't know if that's 9 p.m. or 3 a.m., but it was the
Mm-hmm.
middle of the night to me. And my eyes are kind of looking around for an explanation of what happened.
Okay.
And I start hearing these light taps at the window. So I look over there
Oh
and I
boy.
see the sky light
Okay.
up. And it turns out it was rain and there's a thunder and lightning storm. So I was like, oh,
Okay.
cool. So I kneeled up on my bed and started looking at the storm, watching it rain. And
So
I
you're like,
assumed,
at this point, there's nothing alarming. In other words, this is
right,
just,
right. Yeah,
okay.
nothing alarming so far. The bang or whatever that woke me up, I assumed it was thunder.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing, quick flashes of lightning every once in a while. And
Okay.
then after a moment, there was this really disturbing lightning bolt. And it was like if I were to ask you to draw a lightning bolt, you would draw that jagged yellow line.
Yes.
And it was stuck in a cloud or in the sky. It's hard to explain, but that's how my young
Okay.
mind saw it, and it's how my adult mind remembers it. But there's this lightning bolt stuck in the clouds, and there's electricity coming off of it. There's booms associated with it. There's a halo around the whole thing. And I'm not sure what happened after that, other than I woke up the next morning. I went to the bathroom, and on the way back from the bathroom to my bedroom, you can see out my window,
Okay.
and the lightning bolt was still there. And,
Okay.
I knew that was weird. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it was weird. So I ran downstairs to get my father, and I brought him all the way upstairs to show him the lightning bolt in the sky. And by the time we got there, it was gone. And I remember being pretty like excited and animated and telling him like, there was something there and there was a storm and it was raining but he had to like get down on my level. He knelt down, put his hands on my shoulders, and he was like, "Buddy, like it didn't even rain last night. I'm not sure what you're talking about." And
Wow.
yeah, and so I thought that was strange, but the next shiny thing caught my attention and I forgot all about it. A couple weeks later, I'm woken up again in the middle of the night, this time by my father, and he brings me downstairs and I see my mother shoving my sister into her winter clothes. She does the same to me. And then my dad scoops me up and we all go outside. Well, I'm immediately frozen. I live in Maine, and at the time we were living at the tip of Maine, which is even crazier colder. So my
Right.
head is like shoved into his chest, freezing. And he keeps telling me, buddy, you gotta look up, you gotta look up. So after I don't know how long, I finally like pulled my head out of his chest and I look up and I'm seeing these crazy colors, like reds and blues, and it was the northern lights.
Okay.
It's the only time I've ever saw them. In 2024, when they happened a bunch of times, it was always cloudy around here. I could never see them.
Wow.
So I think those two things happening so close to each other
Uh-huh.
created like a core memory. and it told me that weird stuff happens up there, so you should probably pay attention. And
Yeah,
I think I have been ever since. But that's
right.
kind of the catalyst, everything that started it all.
And that's very interesting because that thing when your father told you it wasn't raining,
Yeah.
it's like for a child to like be aware, something like that. It's like, I don't know, kids don't make stuff like that up.
Yeah, yeah. A really peculiar thing, like very specific to make up. Like, Dad, there was a lightning bolt stuck in the sky.
Right.
Like, that's so weird.
Exactly. It's like, kids will fib about other things, but,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
not about stuff like that.
Yeah, like I didn't eat
Um,
the cookie, I swear, but
right, right. It wasn't me. Exactly, exactly. So that's very unusual. And then
yeah.
what happened? You, did you ever have any other experiences now
Oh,
that you
for
look
sure.
back in childhood?
In childhood specifically, yeah, there was some other stuff that happened, extraterrestrial related. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
so. I think that was the only one that I remember, anyways. And
Okay.
but there were some haunting type things. I think we lived in a haunted house when I was right at that age, and when the
Was
UFO
it in
thing
that
happened,
house that you were
it
living at?
was, yeah.
Okay. And what kind of things
And
happened there?
um, there was a very specific thing that would happen for quite some time. I don't talk about it too often, but because it's really weird. So, for a while, and I don't know
Mm-hmm.
how long that is. I don't know if it was months or years, but I was very young.
Okay.
I would go to bed, and my room was right next to my parents' room. My mom would put me to sleep, and
Okay.
I remember I would wake up again, middle of the night. I don't know if that's 10 minutes after she put me to bed, or, if it's 3 in the morning.
Right.
But I would wake up and I would have like the sense or see the essence of something standing in my doorway.
Really.
And I knew somehow, even though I couldn't see it very clearly, I knew that it was an older man. An older in the sense of late 50s, early 60s, something like that.
Okay.
And it was angry. I don't know why it was angry, but it would hang out in the doorway of my room for a little while. And it kind of had this routine.
Mm-hmm.
So that would happen. And then after a little while, it would come in the room and stand right beside my bed. And at that point, I could really feel its anger, like oppression, And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know that's what it was at the time. I just knew that this thing was mad at me. And I could also smell alcohol.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that would happen for a little while. I'm not sure how
Okay.
long. And then I would open my eyes again because I think I would like cower, like
Yeah, yeah, the
in different stages. And at one point, I can't remember if I took my head out and looked. I must have at some points. But again, there was only the essence. It was almost like it was,
mm-hmm.
wispy or something. But I recall that after it was standing by the bed, the next thing it would do, it was leaning right over the bed,
Oh
right
boy.
in front of my face. And it was just so angry. Like I could, in my mind's eye, I could see its face just being like just so angry. And I could smell the alcohol. And I
That is
knew, I knew it wanted to harm me
right.
sexually.
Okay.
And I just thought that was crazy. And I guess I didn't know like sexually, like at the time, I just knew it was hurting me in a different way, kind of.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I kind of put it together as I got older that that's what I think it wanted to do. But anyways, finally it would like disappear. And it was like
Okay.
this routine, and it would happen fairly often, not every night,
Mm-hmm.
and for a while. And as soon as he would disappear, I'd get up and run into my parents' room and sleep in them in between them
Yeah.
for the rest of the night for safety and comfort. And I didn't tell them specifically or all the specifics that I laid out here. I just said that there was a scary man in my room, something like that. And
And what
I,
did they
I
chalk it up to, a bad dream or what?
yeah, yeah, mostly. Maybe my mother thought there was something to it because she believes in ghosts and all that good stuff. And my dad is the one who's the skeptic. But my dad
Well,
was a
the
very
reason why I ask you is because I was thinking, I wonder if your parents were having their own, because that's the thing,
oh,
parents have their own experience, but they don't say anything to the kids, so the kids
right,
won't get
right,
scared.
yeah,
And later on,
and
you find out everybody was having something going on.
yeah, I my sister has never shared anything with me, and my mom has had her own encounters, not like mine
Okay.
specifically, but she did have some encounters that she shared with me. But yeah,
How
that
long were
was
you guys living at that house, for a while or what?
for yeah. I think since my sister was born, she's older than me,
Mm-hmm.
and we probably stayed there for I don't know, a good 8-10 years,
Yeah, it's a
and then
long
we
time.
moved. Yeah, then we moved out of the area completely. But yeah,
And you never knew, was it an older house or you, well, and I understand when you're a kid, you really
yeah,
don't think about those things as far as like, it was
yeah.
an old house or anything like that.
It was a duplex, and to me it looked nice, and but I don't know. I couldn't tell you. It's interesting. I'm sure I've talked to my father about it,
Mm-hmm.
when I was in my 20s or something like that, but I can't remember like how old it was or anything
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
And that doesn't really mean anything because, you can have weird stuff even in modern houses. I mean, that
Sure.
old,
Yeah.
decrepit, haunted houses is like, that's not the only
yeah,
places that get a ghost in there.
yeah.
So you moved away. That must have been a relief, though. No more
Yeah.
no more visits in the
Well,
night.
yeah, I guess, because we moved away and I was considerably older. I
Mm-hmm.
think I was like in third grade or something by the
Right.
time we moved away. So those weird things the UFO thing happened once when I was 4, and the weird man in the doorway, that happened like 4, 5, 6 years old. And then
Mm-hmm.
like it kind of stopped, and I don't even remember when it stopped. I had some other like visual, not really impairment things, but you know, uh, I would see. The only way I can describe it is using an etch a sketch at a really
Right.
fast speed. Making
Mm-hmm.
these tight turns and all these little
Yeah.
geometric patterns, and I would see it. I would close my eyes and I would see the stars, and then I would see these geometric patterns happen. And that lasted for quite a while, even after I moved, and that was really strange. And to this day, at night, when the lights are off,
Okay.
I see everything in black and white.
Right.
And I've come to find out that that's not how people typically see things. Now, if there's even a hint of light, color starts
Right.
coming
Right.
back
But
in.
otherwise, it's monochrome.
Yeah,
Is what.
it's monochrome and it's snowy.
Okay.
And I'm older now, but that was happening back, when I was a
Okay.
kid as well. It kind of
Mm-hmm.
looked like a snowy TV screen, and everything was monochrome. And I even talked to an optometrist
Okay.
about it, getting my eyes checked, and he thought it might be a neurological issue, and
Okay.
I disagreed, and
Well, you
so
would think
that
that if that was the
yeah,
case, it wouldn't matter if it was daylight or nighttime or anything. The
sure.
lighting you would still
I think it would
see.
happen all the time, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's strange, and I don't know what to make of it, and it's not, it doesn't hinder my life in any way, so it's
Oh, you're
it's
used to
okay.
it. It's what you get used to. So
Yeah.
let me ask you, and this is the differentiation. Did you ever have any more encounters at when you're at home as far as with ghosts or anything along those lines?
In the old place or the
Well,
newer
no,
place?
once you moved out here,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
growing up, you
yeah.
leave.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've had lots of strange encounters throughout my life. A lot of them extraterrestrial. I've seen a lot of UFOs. I don't think I've been abducted or anything, but
Mm-hmm.
I really think, what happened when I was young really propelled me into studying and collecting stories on the phenomenon. And that turned into a passion of writing and creating podcasts and documentaries and things like that.
Okay.
So things
And the reason why
continue
I
to
point that
happen.
out is, when people, how's this? When people go out there legend tripping or ghost hunting or whatever, it's different than when it's in your house. You know
Yeah,
what I'm
when it
saying? Like
happens to
what you
you.
just
Yeah,
said, where you're sleeping and all you see all of a sudden there's somebody framed in the
yeah,
doorway, and the next thing you know, he's standing over you. That takes all the fun out of the ghost hunting thing. You know what I'm saying? It's like, wait, I didn't sign up for this part. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's
Very
what
true.
changes the dynamic. Same thing as far as UFOs. I want to say,
Sure.
you know what? I think, okay, you cite a UFO, that's different, but then you hear about these people where they're getting ET visitations and or abductions, and it's like that whole changes the whole thing
Mhm.
because when you see a light in the sky, for all we know, that UFO is man-made.
Yeah,
You know, we really don't
absolutely.
know. But then that other part, that changes the whole experience. And
Yeah,
I know there's a lot of people with UFO experiences that they're like okay with it or ET experiences, and there's others like, no, man,
yeah.
it's not for me.
Yeah.
What's been your experiences or things that have happened to you?
Well, as far as the ET stuff,
Hmm.
um, seen a lot of things in the sky that I can't identify, but I do admit that a lot of them, probably the majority, is
Hmm.
probably misidentification. I just don't know what I'm looking at. But
Right.
there's been a few where a rational explanation doesn't make sense. So, case in
Okay.
point, I was actually on a paranormal investigation
Okay.
in a town that was like an hour and a half away. And we were done for the night and we had packed up and, we had separate cars. And so I took off on my own. But while I was packing the car and I was still like parked on the street, I saw this weird cylindrical thing
Hmm.
like just above the street lights, so it was very low, and it was almost like a circular sparkler. When you
Okay.
light a sparkler and how
Yes.
that looks, this
Yes.
was completely circular and it had the sparks all the way around it, and it was very fluid, and it was like floating in the sky. There was no sound, like how you hear a sparkler. There was no sound
Yes.
at all. But I'm watching this thing and I'm like, whoa, what the hell is that? And it's gold in color. And I'm watching it float. And again, it's just above like the street lights. And then it gets a little bit higher and it's kind of like roof height of some of the
Hmm.
apartment buildings and houses. And then it just kind of like turns and goes down another street. And I, walk over to the corner and I look and it's gone, completely gone at that point. And I
That's
was
interesting.
just coming off a paranormal investigation. The other people had left. I turned around to look at the place that we just investigated, and all the lights were off. So I know that the homeowners had already gone to bed. I'm sure they were
Right.
waiting for us to get the hell out of there
Right.
because
Right.
it was like 3 in the morning at this point. So, I was like, oh, should I go tell them what I just saw? But all the lights were off, so I was like, no, just go home. So, I finished packing up. I go home, or I'm driving home now, and it's like an hour and a half away. And I'm on this stretch of the highway where it's about 30 minutes of just darkness and trees. Like there's no street
Okay.
lights or anything. And it's like a 30-mile stretch. And as I'm driving, I see this red circle that looks just like the sparkler thing, but this one's red, not gold. And it's almost like it shoots from one side of the road to the other. And it did this big arc like way above the tree line. And it was this weird sparkly thing that was fluid. It looked just like the other thing, but it was red.
Wow.
And I'm like, what the hell's going on? And I'm driving home just from a paranormal investigation. I got coast to coast on, and these strange things
That's
keep
a
happening.
perfect thing to be listening to.
Right?
Yeah.
So I was like, what the hell? And and you want so bad to rewind it, and you
Right.
just can't. And I'm like, what was that? So
Hmm.
I can't say they're extraterrestrial, but it was something strange in the
Right.
sky. And I don't know what the hell it was. It certainly wasn't conventional. And to
Exactly.
see them that late, was weird because I think the first one was like probably, between 2:30 and 3 I saw it. And then
Hmm.
the second one, I was into the drive a little while, so I probably saw that at like 3:30, 3:45 or something. So
Yeah, and
weird.
I'm sure you've heard that, once upon a time, paranormal and ufology was two separate things, don't
Yeah.
cross the streams.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
then you hear more and more people have they'll have a UFO sighting and then they start having paranormal experiences in their home or to
Yep.
themselves.
Yep.
And they look and they say, okay, what was the triggering event? It was like, yeah, after I saw that UFO.
Yeah.
And you would think, okay, what does one thing they have to do with the other? But maybe somehow they're connected. One,
Yeah, maybe it's all the same stuff. And
yeah,
when we look at it through all these different lenses, first of all, we should stop doing that, in my opinion. But when we look at them through different lenses, I feel like we're assigning different words for the same stuff.
yeah.
All too often you can read a ghost story and it sounds like it could be an entity in a house type of
Hmm.
story,
Yes.
or it's really interesting how these stories can, depending on the perspective and lens that you're viewing it through, it could be extraterrestrial, could be a ghost story, could be a cryptid story, interdimensional, ultradimensional, and I feel like they are probably all under the same
Right, exactly. Same
umbrella.
thing with the cryptid sightings.
Yeah,
You'll have where they've seen, an uptick of UFO sightings coincide with an uptick of cryptid sightings, whether it's Bigfoot or
sure,
something else.
sure.
And it's like, I mean, Do they, some people say, are we talking about, are these creatures coming in or out through portals that open up?
Yeah.
Here we're going with the idea that UFOs somehow are intradimensional versus, that we think of in
Sure.
linear travel. That's
Right.
another question that we still don't quite understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I've
and,
been
and
doing
we're in
this
the
a
middle
lot.
of it going, wow,
Yeah, this is crazy. But I've been doing this for quite a while,
okay.
investigating and researching and talk. I've interviewed hundreds of people. And as long as I've been doing it,
hmm
I'm not any closer to any answer.
Let me
I'm
ask you, and
still,
I'm sure you
yeah.
have you ever had people tell you, I've never told this to anybody, but
Oh, yeah.
isn't that great
Yeah,
when
yeah,
because they've kept
absolutely.
it to themselves because some people are really, I tell people despite, even now lately with all this thing of the paranormal shows and everything, there's still a lot of people that they're like, "No, I'm not going to talk about that,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
There's still room for scrutiny, and that sucks, but it still
hmm
happens. But I think it's becoming more and more accepted, and that's good. I want
Yeah.
people to feel comfortable reaching out. But there's, of all the stories that I tell and share,
hmm
there's almost as many that I've been told not to share, and that's
Sure.
okay too. But as long as I could have been,
Yeah,
or
they
as
they
long as I
they they
was,
had like a little mini therapy session with you.
yeah, yeah,
They were
yeah, and
able to tell you the story,
yeah,
and then, oh, by the way, don't tell anybody about it.
right,
But
and
that feels
that's
great now that I just let go of it.
yeah, yeah, and I love that. If I can be a non-judgmental ear for somebody,
Sure.
awesome.
Yes.
I don't have to share your story. That's a passion of mine. You don't have to worry about that. I'll
Right.
find
Right.
another story someplace else. But
Yes.
yeah, so I think I've been that for a lot of people,
Yeah,
and
I
and
think
that's great. That's
I've
good.
spoken to people that when you listen to them, there's like, you've been carrying this around
Mm,
for years, because they don't want to be
right.
known as that person for whatever, what that,
Yeah.
you know,
Whatever
whether it's the
world they
family, work, friends, it's
yeah.
like,
Yeah, whatever world they find themselves in, and they don't feel
and
like they can
sometimes they
share
even
that.
pretend to be hardcore skeptics, by the way. They
Yeah.
pretend,
Yeah.
you know, and then until they do that, when they're
Until
by themselves with you, and they
right.
say, well, you know what, but once this happened to me, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, yes, it's isn't it, but it's and that's the thing because I'm thinking to myself, okay, whether, we're talking here definitive proof, whether it's the paranormal or ETs, UFOs, et cetera, et cetera. You would think, okay, there's people that maybe are lying, and there's people maybe that are mistaken in what they saw, even though they genuinely believe.
Sure.
But then that still leaves so many people when you hear all these random stories like what you've described, where it's like, okay, everybody's lying, everybody's delusional. Come on,
Right, right.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, like I can't say I believe everybody that I talk to.
Mm-hmm.
I would say
Right.
even like 85, 90% of the time, I believe that they believe it.
Right.
But there's like 10% where, I'm pretty sure what you just told me is real. And
Yes.
I can't prove it, but I believe you, 100%.
Haven't you had
And
people that have had
those are the
that one
strange ones.
experience though? I've had people that, how can I say this? That they're not, first of all, they're not looking to have the experience.
Yeah.
Okay. It's unexpected. It's like, and maybe they've only had it one time, whether it's a sighting of a ghost or anything or a UFO. It's that one, but that one experience though, kind of like it's, the BC and AD, before the sighting and after
Yeah,
the
yeah,
sighting,
yeah.
the
Yeah.
reality shifts because
Yes.
that one experience they had
Yeah. It made him a believer or,
of whatever,
whatever.
yes,
Yeah.
or like, man, maybe things aren't as the way I thought
Right.
of reality as.
Hey, if it can open somebody's mind, I mean, we need
hmm
that more than ever right now. So
Sure, sure,
so
but people,
I can appreciate that.
I think there's certain personalities, and I'm sure you've run across some where it's like, I want, like, don't give me horizons with fuzzy edges, like, because if that exists, maybe there is a Loch Ness monster, or there is this, in other words, all these things that are, oh, come on. It's like, well, if that exists, then that could exist, and that could exist.
Yeah.
And some people, their personalities, they're the ones that don't want you to shift their
Yeah.
existence too much.
Yeah.
And let me ask you, have you ever heard a story that when they told you, and I'm sure you must have heard a lot of good stories, that you went, what?
Yeah. Yeah. One immediately pops to mind.
Okay.
So there's this gentleman. It wasn't even that long ago. I don't remember the exact date, but it was like within the last 5, 6, 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
He's from a very remote rural area and had since moved to a bigger city. But he
Okay.
would come home to visit his parents from time to time. So he's doing that one summer. And something he likes to do is to roll a joint, go out on the front lawn
Mm-hmm.
and smoke it and look at the sky. So he's got his joint, he's got a lawn chair in his arm, and he's walking down to the front lawn. And while he's doing that, he hears like this hissing sound or something above him, and it's very high up, but it's like, you know. And so he turns around quick and he's like, what the hell was that? All right, nothing.
Right.
So he keeps walking, and then there's a flash of light and another hissing sound, and it's behind him. So he stops
Okay.
walking and turns around. It's like, what the hell is that? All right, I'm not going to move until it happens again. He hasn't even lit the joint yet. That goes back in the pocket.
Right.
He's preoccupied
Yeah.
now.
Uh-huh.
So he's standing there, and he's like, what is happening? And then all of a sudden, up in the sky, and it's a beautiful starry night, black sky, rural, no pollution, no light pollution. And he sees this square in the sky, and it starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it becomes so big that he's trying to measure it from the constellations.
Okay.
Like I can see it from here to here. So it's massive. Like it's probably maybe hundreds of miles wide,
Okay.
this huge thing in the sky. And then as he's watching it, all these white lines from the side of this white box start converging into the middle of it. And they're
Okay.
getting tighter and tighter, and there's more white lines coming in. And it gets to the point where it looks like a snowy TV screen.
Okay.
While that's happening, every once in a while, there's like this weird electrical hiss.
That's what he
Like
was hearing.
that's what he was hearing, and it's
Okay.
coming from it.
Okay.
And he's like, what is happening? So these white lines are converged in the center of now this rectangle. It kind of looks like he said, like, our flat screen TVs. It kind of looked like
Uh-huh.
that up in the sky. And these white lines are converging into the middle, that the square goes away. And the lines start converging all into the middle, very, very tight, until it makes this white, round ball. So now he's watching this white, round ball. This is all happening within, 20, 30 seconds.
Okay.
He's watching this white round ball, and it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And then it finally gets to a very small size, like bigger than a star, though,
Right.
smaller than the moon, bigger than a star. And then it just shoots off with like this one last hissing electrical
Wow.
noise. And he's like, what just happened?
Where's that joint?
So, he goes back inside. He's done for the night. He actually stayed out for a little bit just watching the sky, see if
Uh-huh.
anything else happened. Nothing happened. So he's like, okay, I'm going to go back in. He can't stop thinking about it. He doesn't sleep well. He wakes up in the morning and he decides that he's going to walk over to where he thinks this thing developed in the sky.
Okay.
He doesn't know if it was celestial height and it was, hundreds of miles, or if it was much smaller and much closer to the ground. But the way he saw it, it was kind of hovering, if you will, over a field that's like a mile from the house. So he starts walking, and he's in this field, and he's like, I know it was around here somewhere. And he happens upon almost like this weird crop circle. It was all of this wheat vegetation had been burned
Okay.
in the form of a check mark.
Okay.
And he didn't know what to make of it. He had this old phone on him, I think it was a flip phone on him, and he took a picture of it. And he said he eventually lost the phone, so he couldn't provide a picture. And he really beat
Mm-hmm.
himself up about that, losing the picture. But that's basically his whole story. And,
Wow.
so he sees this thing in
Right.
the sky, he's making weird noise, and then he sees this weird checkmark crop circle. And,
Right.
he doesn't know what to make of it. And then I talked to him, a few years later, and he tells me this crazy story. I'm like, that is wild, man. Thank you so much for sharing it. And,
That
I have
is.
no answers for you, but I'm going to dig around to see if I can find anything that's remotely related to what you saw, and because I've never heard
Mm-hmm.
of anything like that. So I dug and dug and dug. And, once in a while I would find something that's like a square UFO was seen or a cubed UFO, but it's still nothing like
Right.
what he saw. But I did come across this story. I can't even remember if it's in the United States now. It's in my book, but I can't, I don't remember all the details. except for it was a young boy and he looked up in the sky and there was a square hole in it.
Okay.
And he said he saw creatures looking down through the hole, on and I was like, "Whoa, that's freaking weird." So I sent him that story just because it was at least they saw the square
Right.
opening in the sky, but not a lot of stories like his.
You're thinking to me, I was thinking Portal, kind of. I don't
Yeah,
know. I mean, that's the closest thing I could think of.
right. So strange, but
That
to
is way out there.
yeah,
That is
yeah,
way out there. And then that crop circle thing, and let me tell you,
yeah, strange.
and it's how's this? It's undramatic but dramatic at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, completely agree. Like it's very innocuous and chill, and it lasted like 30 seconds. But,
Hmm.
when you break it down, when you write it out, which is why I love the writing process, you can really break down how insane this sighting was,
Did he
this
ever
this
have
experience.
before or after any other type of like UFO or
N-
ET, or
Not
that
to
was it? No.
not to his knowledge in that sense after. Before there might have been some lights in the sky and and things like
Okay.
that, but nothing like what he came
And that's the
across.
thing when you live out in a rural area where there isn't light pollution, you do see the skies. It's just so much easier to see
Yeah.
stars, and especially or if something looks like it's moving, like that's not a
Yeah.
star,
Right, right.
you know, or
Yeah.
that's not a plane either.
Yeah.
So, what is it? When you
Yeah.
live out in those areas, that you get more of an opportunity
Very true.
to, and like I said, sometimes even now, because I'm sure you've heard of all these conspiracies that, hey, we have flying things that it's us, it's not an ET in there.
Right.
It's us,
Right. Yeah.
you know. So sometimes, for all the times that we think it was, ET behind the wheel, it isn't.
It's
Eh,
very possible. And there's even stories, from the 40s, 50s, 60s that it still sounds like it might have been us,
Yeah,
Very,
yes,
very
yes,
strange.
yes,
Yeah. A lot
yes.
of stuff.
A lot of, and maybe it's both,
Oh,
as a
sure.
matter of fact, earlier today I was reading an article about, all the conspiracies that they have going on about the moon,
Oh, yeah.
you know, from where, like why did NASA not return to the moon after, the Apollo, all those expeditions out there,
Yeah.
and that supposedly they even did go out there, but they kept it hush hush, and from that to that it's basically not it's basically how's this, a spaceship that
Yeah.
it's
Like
hollow.
almost like a satellite, but in the mechanical sense, because it's technically, I think a moon is technically a satellite, but like
Right.
in the mechanical sense
But they
that
were
they're,
saying that one of the things that they were explaining is that it has craters, but they say, which of course, you think are from meteors, but they are all more or less the same depth, which you say
yeah,
normally that would not happen because
very
if you
strange.
get meteors striking at a different, speeds or sizes, you're going to have that. And it was really an interesting stuff like with the what ifs. And I
Yeah.
was like, wow,
Yeah.
all this time. And that they say normally if we would have had a satellite, which is what the moon is for the Earth, it would have been much smaller.
Mm.
All right, that the proportion of the moon to out to the Earth, normally we would not have had such a large satellite. And I was like, okay, I never heard of that. You
Yeah.
always think of,
Yeah.
okay, so yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things out there that it's like, wow, talk about a Pandora's box.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. For sure.
let me ask you, since it sounds like you've done paranormal investigations,
Yeah.
have you ever gone on investigations where it's, for lack of a better word, it's followed you home or it's bled into
Oh,
your
yeah. Yeah.
regular
Yeah.
life?
For sure. It actually, for us anyways, it like happened a lot, and
Okay.
it would dissipate, after like a couple
Mm-hmm.
weeks.
Yes.
But I remember the first time it happened, it really scared me. I had gotten home from an investigation, and I finally laid down. I think this is a really late one. Like we didn't get home till like 5 in the morning or something. So, I finally laid down. The sun's already up, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
laying down, and it's very quiet. Like I'm about to fall asleep any second. And my upstairs at the time was all carpeted,
Okay.
and I could hear something walking on the carpet, and it entered my room, and it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the cat. And I knew that whatever it was now standing right at my bed. And at the time, my mattress was on the floor.
Okay.
And I knew if I opened my eyes, I was going to see something. And I really didn't want to.
See it?
and and I could just feel its presence, and it was inches away from my face. So I was like, okay, just do it. Just open your eyes. It's fine. It's gonna be fine. Nothing's gonna happen. If they wanted to hurt you, they would have done it already.
Right.
So boom, I open my eyes and I see a pair of feet, and then they disappear.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa. So I have the whole heart jump out of my chest thing.
Uh-huh.
I probably yelled a little, but immediately it disappeared. And I'm like, oh no, okay. So I think something followed me home. And so I told
Okay.
the team about it like once I woke up and everything. And for the next few days, every other day, whenever, I would hear the closet, like the linen closet in the
Mm-hmm.
bathroom open. And it was one of those, panel doors, that,
Yes. I know what you're talking about.
yeah, I don't even know how to describe it. That's crazy. Anyway, but
Yeah.
I could hear that open
Okay.
and it would never close. And I, the first time I heard it, I was like, "Oh, is the cat getting in there? What the hell's the cat doing, messing with
Mm-hmm.
that?" So I get
Right.
up and look, and there's no cat, but the door's open. I'm like, "Okay, maybe I scared them when I got up. I scared the
Yeah.
cat." So I close it, and then I would find it open more often than not during like this two
Mm-hmm.
week time frame, and I would
Okay.
hear it every once in a while, and but I never saw it open by itself or anything. But I would just find it open, and that was basically all that happened. I never saw anything again, but the closet door would open.
Let me ask you, when
It
you
was
said
weird.
feet, was it bare feet or were they in
Yeah,
shoes? Bare
yeah,
feet.
bare feet.
That's that's
And
wild.
I perceived it as female for whatever reason.
Okay.
But
Okay, that's
yeah.
interesting. Let me ask you, and I don't know if you remember in that investigation that you went to, was there
Oh God.
any suspect there that would have fit the bill? As to
Probably I don't recall at the time.
okay.
I mean
Okay.
I don't recall now, but at the time I'm sure like we put that stuff together. All that's left with me, because this was like 15
That
years
would be
ago.
the same for me. It'd be like, well, what happened in the investigation? I can't remember, but I do
Yeah.
remember the pair of feet
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that, yeah,
That scared the hell
when I
out of
did
me.
investigations, that happened a couple of times, and I remember, I had taken to smudging my vehicle, including the
Oh,
trunk, and
yep.
because we would leave, and then everybody like would go their own ways, but we would stop usually at a gas station or a BK or somewhere just to talk real quick before we hit
Yeah.
the road. And I remember they would see me open my trunk of my car and smudge in there. They're like, "What are you doing, Marlene?" Like I was like, "I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing." And no hitchhikers, please. And I remember one of the time, one of the girls, and she was pretty experienced, but it still happened. She called me the next day and she tells me, "Hey, you know what? I think somebody's with me. I think somebody came home with
Wow.
me." And she said it was really funny because she goes, and I feel like it was like some type of either young man or young teenage boy. She goes, and she said, I feel like I'm in the kitchen, when somebody's looking over your shoulder, what are you cooking kind of deal. But she knew enough that after a couple, she didn't try to engage in conversation or any type of communication. She says, sure enough, after 2 or 3 year days, it just went away.
Yeah.
It just went away, and
Yeah.
that was it. But yeah, sometimes it's not even who you there. You might have a free floater that nobody knows about
It's possible. It's certainly
that
possible.
decides that, hey, I think you can hear or see me, or there's something about you that reminds me of, fill in the blank. I
Yeah.
think I'm gonna come home with you. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, not how's this? Um, like when you were talking about that childhood experience that you got the
Yeah.
feeling that this was a really angry entity, whatever. And then there's others, it's not a question of anger, it's just a question of maybe I want to be like maybe lost a little bit or
Sure.
confused kind of deal.
Yeah.
And they hook
Yeah.
up with you because, like I said, you might be a nice person or you might have some type of abilities or you remind them of somebody.
Yeah.
And they're just hoping somebody's gonna tell them, hey, like, why doesn't anybody talk to me?
Yeah.
Why doesn't anybody see me? That
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah. And
Um,
I feel like I've come across some of those as well. And if we can be a vessel or just somebody to talk to for a moment,
mhm.
I hope it helped.
Sure, sure. And the reason why I bring that up is you're going to hear of these different paranormal investigators that have, by the way, the flip side of that is have gotten very serious attachments
Oh, sure.
because of where they went to. Number one, I want to say they were unprotected. Like they it's really funny. They're paranormal investigators, but they don't take it seriously enough.
Right.
And or they went to some place thinking it was something, and it turns out that what was there was much darker,
Mm,
and in some cases might have even been non-human. In other words, you underestimate the what's there. And I don't know if you've ever ran across this when you were doing your investigations, where some homeowners on purpose will understate how bad the problem is because they're concerned that the group might decide not to go. If they really tell you
yeah.
maybe how dark the occurrences are, so they'll say, "Oh, we heard this and we think something's going on." And then when the group gets there, then they start finding out, oh, wait a minute, this is not just, oh, we hear, like you
Yeah.
said, a smell or a knock
Right.
or maybe something. There's something here that's much, I hate to use a word, but malevolent.
Yeah.
And,
I don't. I think we're pretty lucky as a team where we didn't
okay,
really come across that. Everyone was
okay,
pretty upfront. We came across one place where the homeowner just didn't know how bad
hmm,
it was, and they lived in like a small apartment complex. Like there was four apartments in there, and they were having trouble in theirs. But we gained access to the entire basement, not the entire place, but the entire basement, and we ended
okay,
up uncovering a lot of something malevolent. We feel,
really.
and so that was just something they were unaware of. You
Were the
know,
other people in the other apartments having experiences, or was it
they
just
wouldn't
lucky him?
they wouldn't talk to us. I think two of the apartments were empty,
Okay.
and the other
Hmm.
people wouldn't talk to us for whatever reason.
Oh,
I don't know, but
I get it. I get it. Some
yeah.
people are like, if I don't talk about it, it doesn't exist.
Right.
But yeah. And you know what? Now that you mentioned the basement, I don't know what it is about basements and cellars that whatever you find there is usually pretty bad. You'll have
Yeah.
the rest of the house, and then everybody will go, but down in the basement or down in the cellar is like, oh, like you
Yeah.
can pay me to go down there. Even when people, they convert it into like living space.
It's still creepy. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
there's something, I don't know if it's the thing that it's buried into the earth or
Mm,
what, but you always, a lot of the stories that I've heard and or investigations that have to do, well, with subterranean, whatever,
yeah.
it's more intense. How's that
Sure. Yeah.
as far as the experience?
Yeah. And I would feel like that's my experience as well. There's always some sort of vibe that's off. It seems like,
Yeah.
whether
Yes.
it manifests into something really scary or not, there's just something about those subterranean spaces that
Yeah.
feels off.
It's like, and then I'm thinking to myself, okay, so this is not claustrophobia because I guess everybody's claustrophobic up to a certain part,
Yeah,
but
to a point,
this,
sure.
yeah. And let me, obviously you can see. Have you ever gone to any of these places and actually seen an apparition?
Yeah, a couple times. Yeah.
What happened?
One of them, we had done this. We brought some people in because we were just like straight up investigators. And if there was any
Mm-hmm.
sort of smudging or some sort of ritual that the homeowners wanted performed, we would bring different people in to do that.
Okay.
And so we did at this particular place. And we must have investigated there seven, eight, nine times. And we were just always collecting massive amounts of evidence. So they just wanted to be rid of whatever was
Okay.
there. And I'm like,
Sure.
well, I don't know if we can do that, but let me bring somebody in and see if they can help. So we bring these people in, and they do a salt ring around the entire residence, and
Okay.
they left open this area that led out from the basement. And we had these K2s set up in the basement, and they went and they smudged the entire house after the salt ring. And they were saying something. I'm not sure what they were saying. I wasn't with them. And they were trying to like expel whatever is in the house all the way down to the basement and then hopefully out of the basement with that
Okay.
salt ring, keeping them following that path of the salt ring out of the
Okay.
basement. So all of that happens. And now I'm outside and they're trying to get everything collected into the basement and then out. And I decide to stand outside to see if I can see anything that's
Okay.
happening. I'm right outside the basement door outside though. So we have K2 set up along a path in the basement, and they would radio me and said K2 number one's going off. Oh wow, K2 number two's going off, and it was
Mm-hmm.
following this path out to outside. And this happened a handful of times, or more than a handful of times. And at one point, while I'm outside, I never saw anything. But at one point outside, finally, I see these two white legs step outside, and
Ooh.
it's just the legs. I don't see a torso or anything, and the legs like turn towards me, like it's looking at me, like it's
And
like,
you're like,
oh,
oh shit.
yeah, I know. I'm like, oh no, and so I'm like, guys, I see a pair of legs.
Right,
Like
right. Like,
I don't know what
yeah.
else to say. And they're like, what? Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, I'm seeing a pair of legs, and I had a camera with me, a video camera, and I held it up, and it wasn't on screen, and I'm like,
Uh-huh. Okay. Interesting.
put the camera down, could see it, put the camera up, can't
Mm-hmm.
see it. It was crazy. So that lasted, 4 seconds, like it wasn't very
Right,
long, but it was long enough to be like, oh my God, that was crazy.
right, right.
So it's still happening though. The K2 is still happening, and things are apparently leaving. So
Okay.
anyways, we kind of get done or it slows down. There's no more path walking that we're seeing with the K2s
Okay.
lighting up. So I'm still outside and now I'm looking in the field behind the house
Okay.
and I see this tree that was never there before. And it was like,
Okay.
like kind of like the size of a Christmas tree. So
Okay.
basically, in the night, I'm seeing like this dark triangle
Uh-huh.
standing in the field, and it's kind of wobbling back and forth. And I'm like, what the hell is that? There's no tree that's there. That's crazy. So
Uh-huh.
I start walking towards it. It's probably 100 yards away from me. So I start walking towards it. I'm getting closer and closer, and I'm still looking, and it just looks like kind of like this blurry black tree, and it's continuing to go side to side. And as I'm getting closer, I'm like, why am I feeling anger? But it's not
Okay.
my own. I feel like something's mad at me. It kind of reminds me, it brings me back to the childhood thing.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, whatever that is mad at me. This is crazy. So I get like within, I don't know, 40 yards of it. And I am literally looking like at this black triangle that
Okay.
looks organic and it's swaying back and forth like a tree. And I hold up the camera to record it. I'm radioing the team to let them know what I'm seeing. And I hold up the camera to record it and it's not on screen. And I'm doing the thing again,
Oh boy.
not there, there, not there, there. So I'm like, what the hell? And then it blinks out.
Whoa.
And I'm like, wow. And so that whole thing probably lasted, 25, 30 seconds, as I'm walking towards
I'm
it and all
thinking,
that.
God, he's getting closer to that thing. It's like,
But
it,
I didn't know what it was, and I think after all of the investigations and the K2 conversations and
mm-hmm.
history that we uncovered, it seemed like this area, which was a former funeral home, it seems like this
Oh my God.
residence, yeah, it seemed like this residence had all of these spirits or something in the
Mm-hmm.
basement, and there was one that was kind of in charge and kind of a jerk.
Yes.
We don't think he was demonic or anything stupid
Right,
like
right. He
that,
was
but
just a jerk. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and kind of kept everybody in
Mm-hmm.
line, but in a jerky way. And I think it was him or her that I saw that was that black triangle, and it was just like pissed that it was
Yeah. And you know
out,
what? And it's really funny because a lot of times people think that I've described, because, you always think of a ghost as being like some, a human like or shadow
Sure.
figure. But I've heard of people actually saying, like you said, kind of the shape of an inanimate object. How's that?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Kind of, it's like, what is that? Uh, like it's not, it doesn't have, let's say, a human outline or
Yeah.
an animal. It's
I have
just
no
like,
idea why it looked that
but
way. It
it's
was so
emanating
strange.
something out.
Yeah, yeah.
And what happened? Did they, after you guys left, did you ever hear from that family again?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we checked in with them a bunch, and they said things were great for a long time. And I think there was like we had stopped investigating at this point because this was like what like 15 over 15 years ago. So
Mm-hmm.
we had stopped investigating as a team together, and um, one of the former investigators heard from a new resident that things were picking up again.
Oh boy.
And I was like, oh no. And then everybody kind of moved out. And because I think the landlord put it up for sale.
Okay.
And then it got purchased. And after it got purchased, we have no
That's
idea
it. You
what's
guys
happened
lost
since
track
then.
of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
But that,
well, see, that's the thing, and that some of these, and everybody, sometimes these funeral homes, probably the basement was where they prepped the. Yeah, but some of these funeral homes, they would
yeah,
have the viewing or whatever you want to call it,
sure, yeah.
the wakes, up on the upper
Now,
floors
now
or
we're
something.
we're we're in the state of Maine, so
Okay.
they even had a room where they kept the bodies during the
Okay.
winter because you can't bury during the
Oh, that's
winter.
right. I've heard that the ground is like
Yeah,
you can't
yeah,
dig,
it's
right?
too hard. You can't dig. So
Oh, that's wonderful.
yeah, so there were all these segregated rooms down there. It was really strange, but it's because they all had a
Yeah, right.
function.
I mean, you look
And
at it and we think of it as morbid, but it was just a practical
yeah,
solution.
right, right. And so we got a lot of activity in that specific
I
room. And
bet.
we were seeing shadow people. We were having K2 conversations, which is crazy. I mean, that's hard to come by with like confirming K2 questions.
Yes.
They're yes and no, but to have it go off and to say a color and to
Yes.
have it go off, and it's just very wild,
Let me
to
ask
sit
you,
through
when the
that.
family moved in there, were they aware that it had a past as a funeral home, or was this some? And the reason why I say this, I think most landlords would like, I'm not going to talk about this, or did they
Yeah,
find out like after the fact?
I think they found out because I think they told us it was a former funeral home,
Right. Okay.
so they must have known. Yeah,
It's like He's like, wait, what do you have those, what is it, those gurneys down there for? Well, that landlord
right,
has got some explaining to do. But
right.
yes, yeah, and I tell everybody, once upon a time, people and would die at home because,
Yeah,
it's not like now where, a lot of people, especially if you had like a lingering disease or illness, your family kept you and you died at home. That was a normal thing. It wasn't a morbid thing because you hear, oh, so and so died in the house. And you go, once upon a time, a lot of people died at home.
yeah,
If they were older or if they had some type of sickness and they couldn't do anything. This thing about the hospital thing, it was like that was only really basically for traumatic trauma, and then they would just they got rid of to go home or you died.
right. Right.
And I said it wasn't a bad thing. It was just the norm. Same thing as people having babies at home, kind of deal.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's just the sensibilities. Now we just look at it with our eyes as, oh my God, so and so died in the house. I'd be like,
yeah.
you know, unless it's something like, a crime, scenario. Have you had an investigation along those lines where you went into some place where it was some type of, that they think that the haunting was attached to some type of crime or something that happened to the family?
I don't think so. I
Okay.
don't think so. Oh my God, yes. What? Yes.
Okay.
It was a
Let's hear it.
murder. It was a
Oh, wow.
murder.
There you go. That'll
Yeah.
qualify most certainly.
Jeez Louise. So, but it was a murder from 1898. So that's
Yes.
why I didn't like jump to mine. But famous story within the town. Okay.
Hmm.
This woman had gone missing, and her body was eventually found like almost 2 weeks later. It was crazy.
Okay.
And she was beaten so badly and hurt so badly that, like, when they picked her body up, her head came off.
Oh boy.
So, over the years, people have reported, seeing her headless body in different areas of town. It's a very small town,
Okay.
and they also reported her full body apparition,
Okay.
and that was seen in her house, in a house that she moved into fairly kind of recently before her murder, and then in the house of the accused her murdered that was accused of her murder. Now her murder is still unsolved to this day. The guy
Right. I
they
was
put
going to
on
ask
trial,
you, did
yeah,
anybody I mean, people
no,
have suspicions, but
sure. So a guy was put on trial and he got
okay.
off. He got off, and
Okay.
it sucks because it was very clear he did it, but
Okay.
they didn't have the evidence that they needed.
Right. Sure.
And at the time, it was seen as the trial of the century in this small, tiny Maine town, and
Hmm.
it was being reported like in the New York Times and across the country. It was pretty crazy. So, um, we investigated the house of the accused murderer,
Oh, wow.
and we had some pretty gnarly EVPs, some swearing stuff, something that said my name.
Okay.
Um, we got footprints down in the basement, like you could hear like
Okay.
walking on the cement. We caught that on audio. But at one point, the cat kind of kept responding to something that wasn't there. And I know
Okay.
cats get the
Okay.
zoomies, but it
Yep.
was just weird, its behavior. And at one point, we decided to like walk around the house together. I don't remember why, but it was an investigator, a homeowner, an investigator. No, no, no. Homeowner, investigator, homeowner, investigator. So there were four of us, and there was always an
Okay.
investigator behind a homeowner. And we're
Okay.
going around the house, and it was a pretty big house, and they're explaining where different things had happened in the house. And while we were walking, the homeowner in front of one of the investigators goes, "Ow," and grabs their ankle.
Okay.
And we all stop what we're doing. We turn on a light, we get flashlights going, and they pull up the pant leg, and there's an awful scratch on the
Wow.
leg, on the ankle. And with the investigator in front of them, like we knew it wasn't the cat getting underfoot. The investigator would have
Okay.
seen it. And the investigator would have seen the homeowner like bend down and scratch their ankle, and they
Right.
didn't. So it was very odd, very odd. And we thought that was obviously very fascinating and all that great stuff. Now, fast forward like, 15 years, and
Okay.
I'm in the small town now. And I'm there for no reason other than to ride my bike. They have a couple of good trails.
Okay.
So I'm in town and it's October and I'm down in this area. I've never ridden my bike before, and it's the Silver Lake area. The Silver Lake
Okay.
area used to be where the cemetery was and where this woman was buried.
Okay.
And they decided to make a man made lake. So they moved all of the bodies out and put it
And they
someplace
what? They
else.
flooded the
Yeah.
cemetery? Okay.
Yeah. So her body, or I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
her ghost had been seen in that area, sometimes headless and other times not headless. And
Okay.
I probably went down there knowing this, you know what I mean? But
Right.
I
Right.
wasn't there to like investigate or anything.
Okay.
So I'm riding my bike and I see this picnic area off to the side. It's right off the main trail. And there's like bushes in front of it, and the bushes kind of create this natural entrance into it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm there and I'm sitting at a picnic table, and I can see this woman running down the main trail. And not normally a big deal, like, like a jogger maybe.
Right.
And normally not a big deal, but I'm not hearing anything. It's October in Maine,
Okay.
so there's leaves everywhere.
Okay.
And I'm not hearing footfall as she's running. And I'm like, what the hell? And so I can see her coming down the trail, but she doesn't reach the bushes where the entrance to the picnic area is. I'm
Okay.
like, what the hell? Did she kneel down to
Like,
tie
where
her
did she
shoe or
go?
something?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was fairly close to her, probably 15 feet away, so very close.
Uh-huh.
And she was like 5'8", and she had long brown hair, and she wore it back in a ponytail. And I couldn't really tell like what she was wearing, because like
Okay.
the bushes and trees and stuff like obscured that. But I was able to see her from like the shoulder up. And again, I wasn't hearing anything. So I stick my head out there, past the bush entrance, and there's no one there. Like I almost
Okay.
thought she was going to be like, like stand up and
Yeah.
scare me, because
Uh-huh.
she should have been right there tying her
Yeah,
shoe.
surprise.
But there was nobody, and I'm like, did I just
That's
freaking see Sarah
interesting.
Ware? This was
Uh-huh.
that's the name of the woman. Sarah Ware is her name, and I'm
Okay.
like, did I just see Sarah? If so, why was she running? Like to me, it looked like a jogger. So was it a different entity? Was it Sarah? I don't know, but I
Yeah,
saw
for all
something I
you
couldn't
know, there
explain.
might have been some jogger
Yeah,
that met her end in that area.
yeah,
And you're thinking yeah, it happens. It wouldn't be the first
sure,
time.
yeah,
And you know what's really well, when you said that her head, because some of the research I've done, some of these, back then, of course, there wasn't forensics, so, but a lot of times they would decapitate. We think of it now like, man, that's really like serial killer stuff. Well, it's pretty bad, but mostly they would decapitate them so to avoid identification.
mm, yeah,
Like if you couldn't tell who it was, and sometimes the hands. That's why they would find a lot
sure,
of corpses, handless and headless, because they were trying to um to make it impossible, unless there was something about the body
yeah,
that they could identify them. They back then, like criminals now, they want to make IDing the victim, because sometimes once you identify the victim, then you know who to look for. as far as the perpetrator.
Right, right.
And as a matter of fact, I don't know if you've heard, Pearl Ryan, the one that was from she's where Mackey's Music World was
Oh,
it
yeah, yeah.
Ohio? It's that her headless thing, and that she was dumped on the well, whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And people don't realize that what the guy really was doing was he was when they originally found her body, they didn't know who it was, and they thought it was a prostitute. What they said, a fallen woman. They used euphemisms back in that
Yeah.
time. And it was near like a fort. There was a fort out there, a military fort. So they were like, everybody was concerned, but not really. It was like, oh my God, it's some prostitute got killed, whatever. And really, how they found out was she had a very small foot for her size. She used like a size 3
Wow.
shoe. They were able to finally. They went to the shoe owner. Like you said, these little towns. Like one guy that sells shoes, and it was
Yeah.
Mr. Pook. And Mr. Pook saw these little booty things that they were, and he goes, "Hey, I know who I sold that to because that's even back then, it was a very small size. I sold it to this country girl in Pearl." And I was like, "Oh, what?" And everything changed once it was a
Yeah.
country girl and not a prostitute, a fallen woman that, well, hey,
Yeah.
that risky lifestyle got you. Then
Yeah.
that's when it took off, and then they started, and they basically, two guys actually hung for it, and there was more to it. But the decapitation, as horrible as it sounds, a lot of time was it's besides the thing of no body, no crime, it was like if you can't tell who it is, then you really can't trace back
Yeah,
who
you
the
don't know who to look
perpetrator,
for.
unless it was a stranger on stranger kind of deal.
Sure.
But yeah, some of those, the good old days, they do horrific things to avoid um, having that corpse identified.
Yikes.
Yeah, because back then, even then, people, even the fingerprints, unless there was a fingerprint to match it to, it's like in a database, like, okay,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
who are you going to match it to?
Right.
But yeah, when you said that thing about that this guy got away, they were more, in other words, they really, really didn't like to convict on circumstantial evidence.
Right.
They really had to have like either eyewitnesses or very, very good, um, like, hey, definitely this was the guy that did it.
Yeah.
We know it for sure. And like rumors, how in small towns they'll have
Oh,
rumors.
sure. Yeah.
Uh,
There was some
yeah,
in the actual trial. There was like some he said type
yeah,
stuff, and but
that's
it
the
was
thing
just
I'm talking about.
all circumstantial.
Yes, exactly. And
Yeah.
back then, yeah, I want to say a lot of people got away with murder. And I'm going to throw in my thing in, back around that time, these were the years Lizzie Borden, that
Sure.
which is a
Yeah.
very famous, and I've spoken to other people that have done a lot of research, especially into that time period. They said, you know what, there's a lot of women that got away with murder.
Hmm.
And they got away with it because nobody would believe that a woman could do something,
Well,
like
good
really
for them.
bad. It was, like the 40 whack kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like that. They were like, no, no, she did that.
Yeah.
She couldn't do that. Something that evil, that horrible, that,
Right.
uh, you know, I'm not talking about poisoning. I'm talking about like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's like, but, that kind of deal. But yeah, back then, a lot of people, I think, got away with things.
For
But,
sure.
and then, of course, which you think about as far as the haunting, that's a perfect ingredient, I would say.
Yeah.
If you look at an intelligent haunting, would be somebody, not only did they get killed, but they never got justice. How's that?
Yeah. Yeah.
They never got, that person never got and then you think about, well, after you're dead, do you really care? And I'm thinking, some personalities do. you
Yeah.
know, Nobody
Yeah.
got punished for what they did to me.
Yeah. I feel like if there is, if Sarah is out there, I do feel like she's searching for justice.
Yeah.
She was from Canada, and she had a wonderful family. She had a daughter that died around 18 years old, and then they had two other kids, and they stayed together until the kids grew up, and then divorced. They divorced, her and her husband, and
So
there
this was,
wasn't.
he was the alleged perpetrator, was her
No,
ex-husband? Oh,
no, it
okay.
wasn't. He was actually a really good guy, and they just kind of drifted apart. The
Mm-hmm.
death of the daughter really kind of destroyed their marriage, and they ended up staying together because of the other two kids. But
Right.
once they were gone, they divorced, which is really rare
Yeah,
for,
it was.
back
It
then.
was.
And so she was kind of chastised for it, which
Oh
sucks.
boy, yeah. Especially in a small
Yeah.
town.
Yeah, yeah. So she ended up befriending this older woman who was widowed and lived in this big house, and she like kept house for her, but also took other small jobs. And there was this man in town who was
Mm-hmm.
friendly with her, and she had worked for him for a little bit. And it is said, it's rumored that he made a lot of advances at her, and
Sure.
she kept rejecting him. And I think he finally got sick of her rejections and took it
Sure.
out on her, which
Yeah, and I hate
also
to
is
say it, but
awful.
back then people don't realize that if you were a divorcee, you know, as a woman, I'm saying you were like fair
Yeah.
game. You know what I'm saying?
And considered less than, which is
Yeah.
awful,
Mm-hmm. Yes. Like exactly like maybe besides maybe he was, one of these, not a nice guy, but then on top of it, the how can I say the morale as far as nobody was like, what does she expect? She's
Right.
divorced. That kind of,
Right, right. Yeah.
it's crazy. It's crazy, but because
It's too
between
bad.
that and in killing somebody, that really speaks volumes. But yeah, when you said that thing that eventually went to trial, but he was not convicted, yeah,
Yeah, it's
I've
too bad.
I've read a lot of stuff like that along those lines
For
where
sure.
that some of the things it's like, man, okay, somebody's owed somebody here a favor,
Yeah.
like behind the scenes. But anyway, let me tell you something. It's been fascinating. Let me ask you, are you working or have you recently released any books?
Yeah, just last year, I put out UFOs over Maine, 10th anniversary edition. So in
Okay.
2014 was my first book I ever released, and that was like, through a publishing company. It was, it was a big deal for me at the time. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I still don't, arguably, but
Mm-hmm.
you could walk into a Walmart and buy my book. It was pretty crazy. And
Okay.
it was called UFOs over Maine, but it got edited to hell, and a lot of stories got taken out. So my
Okay.
second book, I went with a different publisher, and I put even more Maine UFO stories in it. But,
Okay.
I'm the UFO guy now in Maine, at least one of them. And so I just get a ton of stories, and I do a ton of research, and I keep finding stuff. So
Okay.
about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I was like, what's my next book project going to be? And I was like, let's do a 10-year anniversary of my
Okay.
2014 book. So I gave myself 2 years to
Okay.
write this book. So I completely dismantled the first book and rewrote it from the ground up. The first
Okay.
book, the first version, had about 25 stories in it. This new
Okay.
one has almost 400.
Okay.
And so it's got a ton of stories, and we're talking abductions, men in black, entities,
Wow.
landed UFOs. I re interviewed witnesses from previous cases. I
Great.
dug up a ton of, other encounters I'd never found before. Because 10
Okay.
years on, you become better at what you
Oh,
do. And
sure. Of course.
so that came out last year. It's a big tome. I'm very proud of it. It's like the book I wanted to put out 10 years ago or 11 years ago now. And so that came out last year. It's been doing very well, and very happy with it. But I also, once a book comes out, I immediately start working on the next one.
Okay.
And I finished it pretty quickly, and it's actually coming out in a couple of months, and it's called Humanoid Encounters. And again, it's all sightings that happened in Maine. And I take the term humanoid
Okay.
encounters very like kind of loosely. So there's ghost stories, there's
Right.
pale crawlers, there's black-eyed kids, there's Bigfoot, there's aliens. So if
Okay.
it's got a humanoid shape, I found it and wrote about it. So
Okay.
there's
Okay.
about 100 stories in it.
That's
It's about
great.
300 pages, 100 stories, and I'm literally in the editing process right now. It's almost
Oh,
done, and
that's
I'm
the fun
super.
part.
Yeah,
The editing
I
part.
as a writer, I love it. Formatting, because I'm DIY now. Like I walked away from traditional publishing.
Mm-hmm.
There's no money in it, and this is what I do full time.
Right.
So I have to release, on my own, but that also means I take on everything. And sometimes, like, I do hire an
Yes.
editor, but after I get the book back from the editor, I then read through it again and see if there's any like
Right.
creative ideas that I want to change. And so that's the process I'm in right now, and that's not bad. That's kind of
Let me
fun.
tell you
But
something. Yes, it's yeah, yeah. And you know what? A lot of people, I'm going to put my 2 cents worth. I think that the DIY in the publishing world, as far as writers, it's opened up a lot because I think a
it
lot of great
has.
stories, whether they were fiction or nonfiction, got thrown out because you had to go through
Oh,
a
sure.
publishing house
Yeah,
to
yeah.
get
And they
published.
need their I's dotted and T's crossed, which is great, and I understand.
And I think certain stories and writers got, thrown out, which they
Sure,
shouldn't have because,
sure. Now,
or hey, we're not looking for that type of story, but it's a great story, that kind of deal. So
yeah,
yeah, that now the DIY, I think it's fantastic. It's a lot more
yeah.
work.
It is. It's a lot more work, and there's this also like subspecies, if you will. That's awful. I shouldn't say that, but there's this other type of books that are coming out, and it's people that are not writers,
Oh
and
yeah, I know. I
and,
know.
and those are tough to sift through, and I had to do that with some of my research. I'm like, oh my goodness,
No, I know.
and
I know that you're just like, all right. And I know exactly what you mean. You have to read it like, oh, let me
yeah.
read that again. Oh, that's punctuate. Okay, now I understand what they're trying to
Yeah, yeah,
say
yeah,
in that.
yeah. And
Yeah.
believe me, I'm no Shakespeare, believe
No,
me,
I know
but
what you mean.
I
Yeah.
enjoy the writing process, and I try
Yes.
to make as something as comprehensive and easily
Mm-hmm.
digestible as possible.
Yes. Let
I
me ask you
I,
for
I
my podcast listeners, because I am going to put a link to your
oh sure.
website, but for the podcast listeners, what is your website?
It's Slevik
Mm-hmm.
site, and you can
Okay.
go there and buy books. Also, if that's too complicated, just search Nomar Slevik on Google, and all my stuff will come up. So
It'll come up. Okay.
yeah.
All right. So that they could, so that's due to come out. And I'm
Uh,
sure, like what you just described, you'll be working on something soon after that, right?
Yeah, I'm already in the process. Like while the editor had the book, I
Yeah.
started I started on another one, and
You're
I've got like
percolating stuff in your
yeah,
head,
yeah,
like, you know
yeah.
what? I'm going to tell you real quick my own main story, real quick. I want
Sure.
to say this was about, shoot, either '08, '09, something like that. And
Okay.
we had gone up to Port Elizabeth
Cape
and
Elizabeth?
Cape Elizabeth. There we go.
Sure.
I'm changing. I'm thinking of Portland, Cape
Yeah,
Elizabeth.
yeah. It's all right there.
So anyway, and I remember we drove in we said, okay, you know what? We'll go in and we arrived late. And I remember we stopped at this place, which was like little cottages, like, it wasn't a hotel, motel kind of
Sure.
deal. And they rented out little cottages and the woods were like right in the back, and I mean, we
Yeah.
got there and we just like took out, we just fell asleep. People don't realize how driving can be exhausting. But anyway,
Sure.
I remember my husband, he gets up real early and he comes back, he goes, you know what? And I go, and I'm like, what? And he goes, there's a couple of guys. I can't remember if he told me the guys were in underwear or in pants. I can remember is that he says, there's a couple of guys with no shirts wearing deer antlers running around back there in the woods. I'm like, what? I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, man. I guess he stepped outside because he's always one of these that's like always looking around. But I know him because, and I looked at him like, what, are you kidding? And he goes, yeah, man, there's some guys with shirts out back there with some deer antlers on,
That's
running
wild.
around in the woods. And I said, just leave them alone. Just let them do their thing. I don't want to even know what they're doing. But yeah, and,
There's a really interesting story from Cape Elizabeth. We don't have to get into the whole thing, but I did a
okay.
podcast episode on it. But
Uh,
there was a guy going around Cape Elizabeth, and he would break into homes, and
okay.
he would watch people sleep,
Wow.
and then that was it. The few times he was caught, he would just run out of the house. People would
Right.
chase after him. He would get away somehow. He's never been caught to this day.
Can you imagine? Like a peeping
But
Tom kind of deal.
sort of, but like no one ever reported anything, untoward other than, obviously a strange person in your house. That's terrifying.
Also, because it wasn't like that he was looking through a window. He would actually get into your
Get
house.
into the house,
Oh my
stand in the
God.
bedroom, and watch you sleep.
Let me tell you something. You
And
want to give somebody a heart attack, that's the way to do it.
yeah, that's the way to do it. And to this day, he's never been caught. It's crazy. He must have done, over a dozen homes. Crazy.
Um, and either that or and then you think about, I'm thinking to myself, there's got to be some type of obsession or compulsivity with somebody that's
Right.
willing to run that risk.
Yeah.
Something about, who knows what was going on in here,
Yeah.
but for him, where
Yeah.
he's willing to risk, maybe getting killed for all you know,
Yeah.
that he's got to sneak in there and watch somebody sleep. And I'm thinking, what could be, I don't know, exciting about that, or like,
I
like,
know. I know.
like what,
It's
that's really unusual. I'm always looking at the psychology of something as far as like
it's
what would
strange.
motivate somebody, like because
Yeah.
peeping Tom is bad enough. Which, by the
Yeah.
way, a lot of those people that go on to do really horrific things do start out as peeping Toms.
Yep.
When they look at their criminal history, they
Yep.
start off as peeping Toms and then they progress, in whatever type of crime they
Yeah.
commit. But yeah, that as a matter of fact, let me tell you some of the best. lobster roll I ever had was the next day.
Oh,
And we
nice.
got there, it was October.
Okay.
This was the last week they were open, and then they would close down for the season, I guess, for the winter.
Yeah.
And that was the best. It was, oh my God. It was right on the ocean. It was like a little wooden shack kind of restaurant.
Yeah. I mean,
That
there's a
was that was great.
dime a dozen up here.
Let me tell you something, but that was great. For us, it was like, oh,
That's awesome.
wow. It was fantastic. And we caught it right before they closed for the winter, which a lot
Very
of people don't
cool.
realize that. I guess what you were talking about, the winters out there, when you were talking about
Yeah.
your dad, when
Oh
he
yeah, yeah.
catches you up and takes you outside, I was like, yeah, I
Yeah,
was
it's
out there in
cold.
November and that was pretty
It's
cold
cold.
then.
Yeah.
So again, Nomar, it's been wonderful to speak to you, and I want to wish you the best of luck. I'll be following up. Like I said, I'll put a
Sure.
link in the credits to your website.
Sure.
And this has been fantastic to talk to you. I could talk to you for hours and hours because I think you've got so many good stories to tell.
Oh, thank you. This was fun. I appreciate you having me on.
Truly, take care.
You too.
Bye bye.
Bye.
That's great, isn't it? I gotta take a sip of something because let me tell you, I was recording some other stuff earlier today and I've been talking for the most of the day besides this. But anyway, and you know what? I like it when, like I said, these people that interview people, like I said, to me personally, the best stories are the people who have experiences, whatever they are, when they're not looking to have the experience, right? In other words, they're not primed. I was not looking for Bigfoot. I wasn't looking for the ghost. I wasn't, I didn't go to the haunted house or the cemetery. They're just doing whatever they're doing. They're living life, and then this thing happens to them. And of course, and this is the thing, 9 times out of 10, you don't have a camera. And even if you have a phone, yeah, and a lot of times when things happen, in the moment they happen, you, most people, unless it's really, really blatant, you're really not thinking that what you're seeing is like strange or paranormal or anything. You're trying to make sense of it, like in regular, like what am I seeing? When he's talking about that triangle that he's seeing out there, and he's walking towards it. I mean, yeah, he was doing a paranormal, but at the same time, he's like thinking, "What in the hell is that?" So those are the stories that I like as far as regular people having events happen to them. They're not trying to record it. And maybe even in hindsight is when they realized there was something weird, unusual, paranormal. Like that doesn't work that way. And of course, my point being that all they have is their story. They don't have a photograph. Sometimes they do, a lot of times they don't. They don't have a recording, which all they have is like, hey, this happened to me. And I have no idea how this could have, in other words, I can't explain rationally how this, I could see what I saw or hear or experience what I saw. And those are the best stories. And it sounds like he's got plenty of stories. I got to have him back so just he could tell me some more of the stories. Um, and when he did that, he revised his, and that's good. It sounds to me like he keeps all his paperwork on his story, so he was able to go back and recontact these people. And you know what's really funny is even now, I've been doing this for 8 years, and I have thought of going back to my earlier guests and looking them up and saying, "Hey, you want to come back? Have new things happened?" Some of them have passed away. I was like, "What?" Like, and they weren't really old. It's just I was like surprised. Like here I'm looking them up, and I was like, "Oh, in Memorial." I'm like, "Memorial what?" So, but my point being that yeah, that when you keep track of your contacts or your stories or whatever it is that you can go back to them and catch up with them and have them, and sometimes even people will include later on details that maybe you missed the first time around, right? Or maybe they trust you more. They'll tell you, well, you know what? I didn't tell you this the first time, but et cetera, et cetera. That story I told you, well, this happened, or afterwards, this other thing happened. And he's absolutely right when he said that thing about there are people that will tell you stories and they don't want that story retold, period. It's not a question of, oh, keep it anonymous or don't, they don't want the story retold. I think a lot of people have a hard time thinking of that because nowadays with reality TV where everybody wants everything told about them, no matter how intimate. And we're talking here, of course, paranormal or something along those lines. There's a lot of people. How's this? You always hear about people being in the military or the police or certain jobs that is like, hey, I can't let this get out because it's gonna hurt, it's gonna damage my career. And then there's people that sometimes even their own families, they think their families will like either disbelieve them or they don't even want their families to know. How's that? Because of the nature of maybe what they experienced. And some people, it's none of the above. How's this? They don't have a job where they would be stigmatized. They have family that would be like, it's okay. All right. Wow. That's interesting. Wow. That happened. In other words, none of the things that you think, why would this person not ever talk to anybody about this? There's a slew of people out there like that. And even somebody that's really close to them, like a spouse, you haven't even told them. And I don't know whether it's a question that if I talk about it, it makes it more real, or I want to say, and I wasn't kidding, this, and I think this happens to everybody when you have certain events in your life, good and bad, where it's the before and the after this event, you know, happened in your childhood, but you'll remember it when you're old. The other parts of your life will be like nothing. I can't remember all that. That date, I don't remember. That happened. Yeah. But there's certain events, good and bad, that they are like markers in your life. And I want to say that I think the reason why some people never and talk about an experience they had is because that event becomes like a marker for them. And sometimes in a good, I want to say most of the time in a negative way, even if it wasn't a bad experience. But to them, it's negative because it alters their understanding of their reality. The world they thought they lived in a flash, in a moment, in seconds, doesn't, it's not what they thought it was. And then, of course, that leads to questioning other things. What else do I think that's not that way? And it turns out to be. So they just like, I don't want to talk about it. If I don't talk about it, it won't be real. But of course, you can't really, everywhere you go, there you are. So, and then they get to the point, I guess, where, like I told them, they need a mini therapy session. So I'm going to tell you about my experience so that I can unburden myself and maybe, they'll all somebody will know what happened to, that I saw this or experienced this. And usually I want to say it's they give it to a sympathetic ear. All right. Which is, let's say somebody like Nomar, which is, hey, this person um has heard a lot of stories, so they probably won't go, what? Especially like because I think again, like I said, some people are they don't want to be looked at like, man, am I going to tell this story and somebody's going to look at me and think, hey, you're crazy or what's wrong with you? Oh, you're one of those? That kind of thing. So they just think, "Ah, I'll just keep this to myself because if I talk about this, then somebody will know and then maybe they'll just always look at me differently. That'll be me." And it happens. It happens. Some people, and I'm going to tell you something, therapy wise, people don't understand the benefits of being able to tell a story. And in some cases, like he said about that guy that told him about the square and the thing that opened up in the sky, and then it does this, and then he sees that he got back to him and he says, hey, I couldn't find a similar exactly what you experienced. But believe it or not, when somebody tells you, oh, because I've been on the other end of that, when I was a hypnotherapist, when I was doing hypnotherapy in certain instances, when people talked to me about certain things they had seen, and not only would you understanding, you would say, well, you know what? I've heard of that before. And they'd be like, really? Like that? And be like, yeah. And you kind of see like the person feels like better, like, oh, okay. Because I want to say that at some point, sometimes people even think, man, the universe is picking on me. Like, why am I seeing this? Why am I? Again, for all the people that you see running around, ghost hunting, I want to see the ghost. I want to see a full body apparition. I want the full Monty. There's a bunch of people that don't. And there's a lot of people that think that they do until they do. And then when they get that full Monty, then they're like, who told me that I wanted to see this? It was like great. It was fantastic. Oh, how fun in theory. Oh, ghost hunting. I want to see the ghost. And then I'll know there's proof of life after death and blah, 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 blah. Until they see it, until they experience it in a scenario where there is unquestionably this is supernatural. There's nothing like, because I've been around people like that. I've had people quit from paranormal groups because of that. They're all gun ho. They want to go out, they want to do investigations, they want to go to cemetery, they want to go to the people's houses, they want to go to historical haunted places. You name it, I'll be there. Well, let's go because I want to see the ghost. I want to have the in your face, undeniable paranormal moment. And when they do, some of them are real honest and they'll say, hey man, they wig out. They really do. And then there's others that they just stop participating in cases. They never come out now and say, well, I don't want to do this anymore. They just, and the reason why I know this is I've worked with a lot of different groups because I worked with a foundation and I would work as a freelancer with different groups all over the state if I could make it. I was called in to help or just, when somebody didn't show up. So after a while, I knew a lot of the groups. I knew a lot of the, and I was familiar with some of the investigators and I would say, hey, last time that I saw you had this, what happened? And I know sometimes people leave paranormal because they just can't. They move away or life is too busy and they just can't. They can't. And they'll say, no, they just stop coming around. And we kept asking them, hey, we've got this investigation, or can you call and do a phone interview with this person, or can you do research, something, whatever. And all of a sudden they just fade away. And after a while, you find out, oh yeah, that last case they went on something, they either they had an experience or something happened, something disquieting, and yeah, yeah, it's like I said, everybody's different, and it's the kind of stuff that you do, and sometimes it's very subtle. And I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. Anybody that's done paranormal work, especially yeah, I'm going to say anything. Even ufology and ETs, the abductions, all that. I don't care. People are going to say, nah, Marlena, yeah. Or whether it's paranormal, the ghost, whatever. There comes a time where you need to pull back, even if it's for a few months, because, that saying about that you look into the abyss and the abyss looks back at you. I think that happens where all of a sudden, whatever it is, whatever work that you're doing, in other words, you become more than just an observer. And you'll hear it. You'll have paranormal investigators that say stuff started happening at my home. People that were doing UFO and ET research, they'll say weird stuff started happening to me. All right, like there's something that all of a sudden, like a magnet, like I don't know if it's because you're vibrating in that space because you're doing the research or you're going to places, and where all of a sudden you're like pulling in like a magnet. And I don't know, maybe on a metaphysical, I don't know, way that we don't understand, that like attract like starts to work. And like I said, it's really different when you're out in the field investigating something, whatever it is, versus when it's there with you at home. That changes the dynamic real quick. So everybody that's been doing this work for any amount of time will tell you, yeah, I had to take a 2, 3 months off. Yeah, I need to get away from that, shut myself off because weird stuff started happening about around the house. And or I was hearing things or I was seeing things or I was starting to have bad dreams or my sleep was suffering. Something was going on. And I've even had, people that their spouses were like, "Hey man, you got to cut this out for a while. There's strange stuff happening here when you're not here." Their spouses were the ones that stepped in and said, You either stop it altogether or you got to step away from that for a while because something's going on. So yeah, I mean, there's a whole realm out there that for all the research and all these paranormal shows that there's, I want to say there's a lot more that's not known or even understood versus what we know, despite everything. But that's why it's interesting, I guess, because we all want those answers. Unless, like I said, there's people that when they get the answer or part of it, or how's this proof that there is something, then it's like, I don't want to know that anymore. What? I want to live my life. My reality is not that. It is not that. And I'm going to give you a perfect for instance. A lot of people will believe, yes, we die, we go to heaven, or there's an afterlife. I'm not talking about anybody that thinks that, okay, when you're dead and it's over. But if you think about it, that experience that he talked about when he was a kid, that he's seeing this man that's angry, smells like alcohol, comes in through the doorway, and he even feels in some way, some empathic way, that this man maybe wanted to molest him, as a child. All right. There's a part of you that it's like, wait a minute, God, not only do you die, you don't go to heaven. I mean, God, this got to be a horrible existence. That you are that horrible person or whatever your life was, that you're so angry that you are stuck. Okay. Let's say with that in some type of alcoholic nightmare where you're still walking around the place you used to live at and you're wanting maybe a victim. I mean, think about it as an existence after the fact, that when you're dead, that's horrible. At least I would think so. And I think a lot of people, when they're presented with that there is a possibility that the afterlife after you die is not heaven and the pearly gates in St. Peter. Okay. I'm not even going to go into the hell part. I'm just talking about none of that, that this could be your existence. It's like, wow, that's disturbing. Oh man, that's not what I want. I want to go to off to the golf course in the sky. Something like, yeah, along those lines, yeah. And that's something difficult to wrap your head around. But anyway, I hope you like this show. I have a lot of great guests lined up. Pretty soon I will be taking in guests for season 18 of Stories of the Supernatural that runs from July to December of 2025. And a lot of like I said, new people, returning guests, the ones that haven't died, obviously. Uh, and again, go to miamighostchronicles.com, mpellicer.com. I've got links to everything there, whether you want to sign up for the Substack newsletter I put out, or links to any of the shows, whether it's you know, the, the MP3 file or the link to the video. And again, I'm on all the major video platforms, um, Rumble, YouTube, Cloud Hub, BitChute, Steemit. There's some that I gave up on because honestly, for example, in some of these, like I can't remember if it's Vimeo or Daily Motion, they limit you like to 1 hour, and a lot of these things run beyond an hour. But anyway, yeah. And as far as podcast, wherever there's a podcast platform, I'm there. I'm there. Just look for Stories of the Supernatural, Nightshade Diary, Supernatural Storytime, or just look for MP Pellicer. You'll find me one way or the other. So yeah, and like I said, if you come and you listen to anything on my website directly, you don't have to. There's no commercial interruptions. And the reason why I say this is that sometimes I will listen to my own shows on podcast platforms just to see how it sounds like. Like if I was a listener, what does it sound like? And I was like, another commercial? Don't get me wrong. Monetization is a wonderful thing, but wow, it's like, and this, and now we have a word from our sponsor. And I was like, all right, what great timing, not. So again, go to mppellicer.com and you'll find all the good stuff there. So till next time, guys, thank you. You are all wonderful for spending this time with me, and I will see you next week. Till then, take care.